Hey everyone, the Mistress of Horrors is here yet again. As you also know me as author DL Tillery. And welcome back to my channel. This week's episode, we're going to talk about writing fear in horror. I have 3 tips that I think are really good for writing fear in horror, so I'm going to share them with you. But before we start that, how about you press that subscribe button and give this video a like and ring that bell so you know when I'm uploading new videos. Now, fear in horror. So the first tip I have for you is get to know your evil. Yes, get to know that evil before you write it all the way into the story. Meaning, do a bio of your evil. And this, I'm saying evil as a general term to focus on rather, it doesn't focus on rather your evil is an entity, a creature, or a person. So that being said, obviously we all know that there's different types of horror. If you don't know about the different types of horror, and I have a category video about the different types of horror there can be. It's my opinion on some of those, but they all exist. So that being said, when you are getting to know the evil, know everything you can know about the evil in your story. Where the evil came from, or maybe it's so shrouded in mystery it doesn't have a very specific place where it came from. These aren't necessarily all details that your reader will find out, but you as the writer should know as many details as possible about your evil. This will help you when you're writing the creature, the person, the what entity, whatever. That way you understand this evil as much as possible. Believe me, it will help you when you're writing the fear aspects later in the story or from the beginning of the story, because you want to be afraid at the beginning. Just a thing. Alrighty, tip number 2. Now, tip number 2, you need to build that fear and build the ambiance of it. So you really want to focus on the details of the fear that's in the story. So that whatever your build up to that is. I mean, it depends on what type of horror you're writing, but they all have fear in them. And my thing is the best exercise for this would be to sit down and focus on your fears, whatever those fears may be. Maybe you're afraid of werewolves, or maybe you are afraid of the dark, or you are afraid of undersea creatures like one of my friends. If that is the case, then sit down and think about when you are afraid of those things, what do you feel? So the build up to that fear. What runs through your mind when you're becoming afraid? Those types of exercises will help you write fear better. And then whatever the fear of the characters in your book or story may be, then you want to think about those aspects of what would be the buildup. Even if you yourself are not afraid of those things, you by doing those exercises that I just spoke about, you actually can come up with the buildup, the details. Let's say you are afraid of undersea creatures or just the water in general. Maybe you have a fear of drowning. If that's the case, maybe, and I don't have a fear of drowning. So an example of that, of you trying to do that and not being afraid of that specific thing, like myself. And then I would think the feeling of my lungs would make me be afraid. And of course, obviously, the aspect of death, duh. What would I be feeling? Not being able to breathe, slowly losing that breath, and the water seeping down your throat into your lungs, the expanding of the lungs, the it becoming plump, the feel of that. Not being able to breathe, the slowness, your esophagus, those type of things. So you want to think about what that pain, what would the pain be behind the drowning? What would run through the mind of a person who's afraid of drowning? Why are they afraid of it? Also, that being said, we're not necessarily talking about the backstory of the character and why they're afraid of those things, but what they feel when they are becoming afraid of said fear. Okay, so you definitely want to build the ambiance. The details is very, very important. Now, if we're talking about the kills and we're talking about smells and sounds, very, very important, because you want the reader to get in on the fear. even though they're not the character who's afraid. But you want them to feel what the character feels when you're writing really good fear in your horror. So the kills, the details of the kills, and how much blood is spilling out. The sounds, as far as cracking of bones, the mushing sound of meat, the creature sounds, the snarling, things like that. You really, really want to think about the building of the fear. So details, details, details. Even if you don't put all the details in the story when it's complete, but you want it to be very structured around what's happening, because with that, you help build the fear. Alrighty, and tip number 3. Decide who lives or who dies. Obviously, you're deciding who lives or dies because you're the writer of the story. You're the god of this world. But you want to sit there and say, okay, am I going to be one of the horror stories that kills everyone who's the good guy or kills everyone who's the bad guy? Or do I have a balance of these things? Or does no one die, or does everyone die, no matter what they are like? That being said, thinking of those things and to making notes of those before this story is complete. You don't have to have an outline, because if you don't outline, you don't outline. But little notes and things of how you are building your fear in this book will help you build that fear and write that fear in the story. So this aspect of the death is very important, because obviously in horror there's death in most cases, even if it's going to be a fake death and it ended up being a psychological thing and they think they died and they're really not dead, and blah, here they are in the mental hospital at the end, but they thought they died. That type of thing, as an example. So even if it's not a real death, you're still deciding who dies. Or maybe it's not a complete death and it's just a mind death, or it is just a emotional death or something like that. So if it's something more psychological, it's still a death. So think about who may live and who may die. What's your path for death in your horror story? Sometimes we have an idea. Like when I wrote The Room Within, I knew the character, what was going to happen to him at the end, and then leading into the next thing. And I pretty much knew who was going to die, who's not going to die. You don't have to know, mind you, and it can change. But the whole point of it is to build the fear and write the fear good and well, I should say. Write the fear well in your stories. So those are my 3 tips for writing fear in your horror. There are plenty more things that we could talk about to get your horror where you want it to be, where you want your fear in your level of fear in your writing to be in your horror story. But those are my 3 top tips. So give them a try. Let me know what's your fear. We could talk about that in the comments. What is your top fear? What's the thing that makes you afraid the most? And then maybe we could talk about what do you feel to that build up? What gets the fear going, like your heart racing and sweat starts beating on your forehead? What makes that happen? What makes your heart race when your fear is about to come to fruition? Alrighty, I will see you next week's episode. Stay scared.